morning. Joining us now, Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia, and fan favorite. Hey, Joe. Good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning.
Joe, want to talk about this letter that was leaked. It was a letter sent from the president's legal team to special counsel Robert Mueller in January. Before we get into the contents of it, I am dying to know, who do you think leaked it?
Oh, I have no idea. And I'm glad it's out, though. I mean, I think it was. I'm delighted that somebody leaked it, because it lays out very coldly and legally and realistically exactly what Mueller has been told and exactly what the president's positions are, all of which I agree with.
Now, the criticism here from the left mostly is that the president thinks he's above the law. There was one example, for instance, Rudy Giuliani said over the weekend that the president could murder someone and he still couldn't be indicted. Could you walk us through that exactly when it comes to just generically for the president of the United States? If he explicitly commits a crime, what happens?
Well, let's assume the president commits a bank robbery. Under the legal interpretations of the Constitution by the Department of Justice in the 70s and the 90s, under Republican and Democratic administrations, a sitting president cannot be indicted. The only way you can deal with a president in order to discipline him or her is to impeach them under Article 2. And then once they are impeached and then removed from office by the Senate, they can be indicted. They just can't be indicted while they're sitting as president, because that would interfere with the execution of the functions of office. And since they are the only thing that constitutes under the Constitution the executive branch, they obviously can stop any prosecution of themselves as well. But that's not the reason. The reason, according to the Justice Department, is that it would interfere with the execution of their office. For example, when Richard Nixon resigned after he was going to be impeached in the House. He was not impeached, remember. The committee only voted to impeach. When he resigned from office, he could have been indicted for obstruction of justice, but Jerry Ford pardoned him. We will all remember, and Ford was criticized for it, but he was later praised as having the foresight to see that an indictment of a defrocked president would be terrible for the country. He's now viewed, Jerry Ford is now viewed as a hero. A little too late, in my opinion.
All right. Now, I wanted to talk to you about this letter where it comes out where Giuliani is basically saying that what Trump's legal team is putting out there is you're going to have to subpoena the president. That would be unprecedented, and it would probably go right to the Supreme Court. How long does that get tied up there?
Well, all of these cases would be expedited. This case involving, let's assume they would subpoena the president, which I don't think Mueller's going to do, because I think he would lose. Let's remember what this is about. The Nixon case, where Nixon lost in the Supreme Court 9-0, was a subpoena for tapes which Nixon had in his possession. It wasn't for testimony. There was a trial that was about to start with Halderman and Ehrlichman, and Leon Jaworski said, I need those tapes. There may be evidence of guilt on those tapes. There may be exculpatory evidence of innocence. The Supreme Court ordered the president to turn over the tapes. The Supreme Court did not order the president of the United States to testify. That has never been decided by the Supreme Court. And the language that does exist in the Supreme Court says you got a tough road to go to force a president to testify. So what Giuliani's people are saying in the letter, John Dowd and Jay Sekulow, is that under existing law, you cannot subpoena the president. And in 1997, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled specifically that the President Clinton, could not be forced to testify in the Espy case. Remember Mike Espy, his secretary of whatever, who was indicted by an independent counsel, another independent counsel who took his warrant too far. So the existing law is you cannot indict a president. The law is you can get documents or documentary evidence from a president if it's absolutely essential. But if you want testimony, you will have to show that you can't get that evidence anyplace else, and that the testimony will not interfere with the exercise of the power of the presidency of the United States as he tries to do things with North Korea, China, Japan, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, Giuliani also said he would not testify until they get the scope memo. Is that something that someone who is called on to testify legally has the right to know? What is the crime that is being investigated?
Generally speaking, no, but this is the President of the United States, and everything changes when you involve the role of the President of the United States. Let's remember something. The President is the Chief Executive Officer of the United States. He is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, not the Attorney General. So if the President wanted to, he has the constitutional authority to fire Mueller, to stop his investigation, to order that all the records be turned over to his people at the White House, a whole host of things. Now, he's not going to do that. But when you do an analysis about whether or not you can force the President to testify, you have to understand that he can short-circuit this at any stage. The political consequences of that, of course, could be impeachment, but that's fine. But as a legal matter, the President under Article 2, and I don't know if you've read it lately, but this is sort of a tribute to the Founding Fathers. It's an amazing sentence. Listen to this. This is the entire sentence about what constitutes the executive branch. The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. There's no mention of the Department of Labor in there, or the Justice Department, or any other department, because they didn't exist when the Constitution was written. We have one president, one executive authority, and Mr. Mueller works for him. It's probably, I don't think the president would ever fire Mr. Mueller unless he really did something really stupid. By the way, did you know that Bob Mueller actually sleeps in the Office of Special Counsel's offices?
No.
He lives there. He's like one of these congressmen who used to sleep in their office because they didn't want to have an apartment. Mueller sleeps in his office. This guy's a nut. He's become crazy. He's like something out of a bad movie.
So not only are we paying for the investigation, we're now paying his rent, is what you're saying.
That's right. I mean, you got to be sick.
All right, Joe. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you shedding some light on this.
I learn something literally every week when we talk to Joe. This week, it's Bob Mueller sleeps in the office.
Is this a great country or what?
It is a great country.
It is a wonderful country.
All right, guys.
And you're doing your part. Thank you. And you know what? It's amazing to think about. Today is the 500th day of the Trump presidency.
Wow.
And we've been talking about this for almost every single one of those 500 days. That's how long this thing has dragged on.
It's ridiculous.
But we'll talk about some of the other news that's actually happened during the Trump presidency and during those 500 days in just a moment. Thanks to Joe.